You've probably heard people talk about RED footage, and yeah, it looks pretty good, doesn't it? But if you're like I was before I owned one, you've probably wondered, is it just hype? Is this tiny cube really a cinematic powerhouse? Or is it just a trendy flex for people who like red logos and want to tag work with shot on red? I was, and still am, a Sony shooter. Most of my early career was on Sony bodies, and I still use the FX6 and an A7S III regularly. But the allure and promise of what the Komodo X brought to the table image-wise intrigued me enough to get one. Pre-price drop, so RIP my bank balance. In this video, I'm going to show you what it's actually like to shoot with and what kind of footage it really delivers. Spoiler, well, let's talk about it. A quick note, I'm going to try and keep the cutting back and forth to a minimum in this episode, so you've got plenty of time to really scrutinise the image. All of what you'll see was shot in 6K, 16:9, Red RAW LQ, and I edit in a 4K timeline. I can talk more about getting the most out of RED's IPP2 colour pipeline in a future episode if you're interested. Even though full frame and even large format is very much the trend right now, there's something classically cinematic about the way Super 35 renders depth, compression, and perspective. The Komodo X leans into that beautifully. This isn't a spec breakdown nor lab test, this is very much real world stuff. It'll be footage from actual client shoots, some limitations you should know about, and whether or not I think the Komodo X is a good investment based on its image. We'll also talk a bit about workflow, colour and file sizes, because Red RAW is massive. And if you're curious about how the Komodo X stacks up directly against the FX6, I covered that in more detail in another episode, which I'll link to above. This time though, we're going to go deeper into the footage itself. Let's start with a sun-drenched swimwear suit from earlier this year. We shot on the beach, natural light, harsh sun, sand, pebbles, but here's what stood out immediately, the latitude of R3D. The dynamic range in this camera is absurd. The skin tones held together perfectly, the whites didn't clip, and the shadows retained all their detail. I was able to expose for the highlights without losing the mids, and in post, there was so much room to maneuver. Most of my work is in pretty dynamic lighting environments, basically outside, so I use the excellent Breakthrough Cinema DFM. If you want a more in-depth look at that, I did a whole episode on it. But it's so good, I hardly miss the electronic ND on the FX6. It tames the sun. Was this camera overkill for this shoot? Maybe, but I wouldn't have gotten quite the same roll-off or colour depth out of the FX6. Something I think is a pretty important feature of the Komodo X, like I touched upon at the intro, is its Super 35 sensor. That's the format Hollywood used for the majority of its golden age, so decades of cinematic history were captured on Super 35. So I think we're all kind of culturally conditioned to associate that look with cinema. Then there's a project that couldn't be more different, a quiet, clean showcase of architectural interiors for a high-end joinery firm. These guys aren't your local carpenter, they're million-pounder room masters, and it's always totally humbling being around their extraordinary work. For their kind of project, you have to be able to deliver results that match. And here, the Komodo X shone in a totally different way. Detail. We were shooting controlled lighting inside a modern building. Lots of whites, neutrals, clean lines, and the footage has this crisp, understated quality to it that almost felt like a medium format still. Pairing the Komodo with my Nissi Athena primes meant subject separation where I wanted it, but for interiors I tend to stop down a bit. The Athenas are wonderful to work with. I'll make an episode about them exclusively at some point. I use the Zeppelin Micro 3 slider here as it's just about small enough to travel with, though using it with the KX definitely exceeds its design payload and requires a fair bit of stabilisation to smooth out the rough movements in post. This shoot reinforced something I keep discovering. RED's image is so versatile. It's not just good for flashy campaign work, it also lends a real elegance to slower, more deliberate pieces. Next up, a product campaign for a sustainable candle brand. Lots of dark backgrounds, selective lighting, and shallow depth of field. Close-ups. This is where RED footage sings. There was nuance in the shadows. I could lift details out of near black backgrounds without introducing noise or weird colour shifts. And colour fidelity in R3D is just confident. That's the best word I have for it. We pushed some of this footage in post deliberately, and it held up better than expected. You can be quite aggressive with RED footage and it still feels natural. Plus, Komodo has that global shutter, so even handheld movement is pleasing and distortion-free. I've shot a lot of product stuff with Sonys before, and while they're fast, convenient, the Komodo just feels much more deliberate. Kind of like every frame matters more. Let's talk about one of the major limitations, though, of working with RED footage: file size. Even in LQ mode, RED RAW files are huge. Like I said at the top, I shoot 6K 16:9 in LQ, the low quality setting, though it's anything but. And still, the drive space adds up fast. You need fast cards, ample storage, and a robust backup strategy. This isn't like working with mirrorless H.264 footage. You'll want a robust NAS, redundant backups, and a clear plan for media management. You might even want to consider proxy editing. R3D footage is incredible, but the workflow, not trivial. Proxies can help, but there's still a real time and storage overhead, and while RED has improved the usability of their files, it's still not perfect. There's no way to natively preview clips on the Mac, and it's 2025. The Komodo X, in spite of its insane footage, is still not my default camera. For a lot of gigs, I'll still use the FX6, especially if I need a fast turnaround, or I'm working completely solo without AC support, or I just don't want to stress about power, boot up time, or file size. And let's be honest, sometimes rigging a Komodo is overkill. It can scream production when all you need is capture. That's where something like the Sony a7S III comes in. It's smaller, lighter, quicker, and it's a camera I still use all the time in 2025. But when I can use the Komodo, I usually want to, because I know the footage will have longevity. I know I can grade it flexibly, and I know the end result will be something I'm proud to put my name to. Is the Komodo X worth it? If you're a solo shooter doing quick turnaround stuff, there's an argument that it's not. It'll slow you down, it'll frustrate you, you'll spend a fortune on batteries, but if you're building towards more deliberate, higher end production work, it's an absolute weapon. One that demands more from you, but gives so much more back. It's also surprisingly portable. I've travelled with mine, and with the right rigging, it can be made to be compact enough. So no, it's definitely not for everyone, but it is for me. And after a year of working with it, I still get excited to look at the footage. If you want to see more footage from the shoots I mentioned, or get a breakdown of how I light and edit these pieces, let me know in the comments. You can also check out my FX6 versus Komodo X video, or even an episode about the importance of documenting everyday life in the first place. If you're into this kind of thing, real-world videography, camera insight, and the philosophy of filming, I'd love it if you subscribed. Anyway, thanks for watching, see you next time.